I will never forget the day I met Link. It was a warm spring day. I was on my usual trip back to Hyrule with my wagon of goods to sell in Hyrule Market at the annual Spring Festival. 1. I have been a traveling merchant since I was 14. This is my 6th year returning to Hyrule. The last 2 years I was not able to return when Princess Zelda sent word of an evil presence in Hyrule. Then, all contact was lost. For almost 2 years I tried to contact Princess Zelda. Desperately, I kept trying to find out if she was ok. I was never too long without contact with my good friend. Then I was considering going to investigate, when one day word came in that peace had been restored to Hyrule, due to the legendary Hero of Time. After some catching up time with my old friend, I came to find out what really happened. Seems that a Gerudo named Ganondorf, an evil man from Jorduo Valley, desired the legendary Triforce. Though the Triforce was only told in fairy tales to the children where I come from, I was amazed to find out it really existed. She told me how she played with things she knew nothing about, and about how Ganondorf tricked the soon-to-be Hero of Time into unlocking the door to the Sacred Realm. I even noticed that Zelda was a little older than I. Last I saw her, she was 4 years younger than me. It was told to me that when Ganondorf went into the Temple of Time and into the Scared Realm, time jumped ahead in Hyrule 7 years. Yet only 2 years passed in my land and in the rest of the world. After the Hero of Time defeated the King of Evil, the hero was granted to either return to the past or to remain in the present time. Since he chose to remain in the present, Zelda jumped ahead of me in age by 4 years. It seemed that everyone in Hyrule jumped in age from the rest of the world. But now that peace was restored, life resumed in Hyrule. The great Deku Tree has said, "We will travel not only in space, but in time as well." I have just returned from a 1,000-year lucid dream, and I am here to tell you what I saw, and to tell you how such trips are made. It is a precise operation, it is difficult, it is dangerous. It is the new frontier, and only the adventurous need apply. But it belongs to anyone who has the courage and know-how to enter. It belongs to you. I started my trip in the Kakariko village graveyard, with old newspapers, folding in today with yesterday and typing out composites. When you skip through a newspaper, as most of us do, you see a great deal more than you know. In fact, you see it all on a subliminal level. Now, when I fold today's paper in with yesterday's paper, and arrange the pictures to form a time section montage, I am literally moving back to the time when I read yesterday's paper. That is traveling in time, back to yesterday. I did this 8 hours a day for 3 months. I went back as far as the papers went. I dug out old magazines and forgotten novels and letters. I made fold-ins and composites, and I did the same with photos. The next step was carried out in a film studio. I learned to talk and think backward, on all levels. This was done by running film and soundtrack backward. For example, a picture of myself eating a full meal was reversed from satiety back to hunger. First, the film was run at normal speed, then in slow motion. The same procedure was extended to other physiological processes, including orgasm. It was explained to me that I must put aside all sexual prudery and reticence, that sex was perhaps the heaviest anchor holding one in present time. For 3 months I worked with the studio. My basic training in time travel was completed, and I was now ready to train specifically for the Wizzrobe assignment. I went to Gerudo City and studied the Wizzrobe with a team of archaeologists. The Wizzrobe lived in what is now Misery Maya, the Seven-Star Isles, and Termina. I will not recapitulate what is known of their history, but some observations on the Wizzrobe calendar are essential to understanding this report. The Wizzrobe calendar starts from a mythical date, 5 Ahua 8 Komyu, and rolls on to the end of the world. Also a definite date, depicted in the codices as a goddess pouring water on the earth. The Wizzrobes had a solar, a lunar, and a ceremonial calendar, rolling along like interlocking wheels, from 5 Ahua 8 Kumyu to the end. The absolute power of the priests, who formed about 2% of the population, depended on their control of this calendar. The extent of this number monopoly can be deduced from the fact that the Wizzrobe verbal language contains no number above 10. Modern Wizzrobe-speaking Garo use terminin numerals. Wizzrobe agriculture was of the slash-and-burn type. They had no plows. Plows cannot be used in the Wizzrobe area because there is a strata of limestone 6 inches beneath the surface, and the slash-and-burn method is used to this day. Now, slash-and-burn agriculture is a matter of precise timing. The brush must be cut at a certain time so it will have time to dry, and the burning operation carried out before the rains start. A few days' miscalculation, and the year's crop is lost. The Wizzrobe writings have not been fully deciphered, but we know that most of the hieroglyphs refer to dates in the calendar, and these numerals have been translated. It is probable that the other undeciphered symbols refer to the ceremonial calendar. There are only 3 Wizzrobe codices in existence, 1 in Hyrule Castle Town, 1 in Clock Town, 1 in Gerudo City, the others having been burned by Egos to Ikana. Wizzrobe is very much a living language, and in the more remote villages nothing else is spoken. More routine work. I studied Wizzrobe and listened to it on the tape recorder, and mixed Wizzrobe in with Hylian. I made innumerable photo montages of Wizzrobe codices and artifacts. The next step was to find a vessel. We sifted through many candidates before settling on a young Wizzrobe worker recently arrived from Mizurimaya. This boy was about 20, almost black with the sloping forehead and white eyes of the ancient NES-era Wizzrobes. The physical type has undergone little alteration, except in Wind Waker, where they wear toucan masks. He was illiterate. He had a history of epilepsy. He was what mediums call a sensitive. For another 3 months I worked with the boy on the tape recorder, mixing his speech with mine. I was quite fluent in Wizzrobe at this point. Unlike Lizalfos, it is an easy language. It was time now for the transfer operation. I was to be moved into the body of this young Wizzrobe. The operation is illegal, and few are competent to practice it. I was referred to a Goron doctor who had become a heavy metal addict and lost his certificate. He is the best transfer artist in the industry, I was told, for a price. We found the doctor in a dingy office on the side of Death Mountain. He was a thin grey Goron who flickered in and out of focus like an old film. I told him what I wanted, and he looked at me from a remote distance, without warmth or hostility, or any emotion I had ever experienced in myself or seen in another. He nodded silently and ordered the Wizzrobe boy to strip, and ran practiced fingers over his heavenly naked body. The doctor picked up a box-like instrument with electrical attachments and moved it slowly up and down the boy's back from the base of the spine to the neck. The instrument clicked like a Geiger counter. The doctor sat down and explained to me that the operation was usually performed with the hanging technique. The patient's neck is broken, and during the orgasm that results, he passes into the other body. This method, however, was obsolete and dangerous. For the operation to succeed, you must work with a pure vessel who has not been subject to parasite invasion. Such subjects are almost impossible to find in present time, he stated flatly, his cold grey eyes growing wide as saucers as they flickered across the young Wizzrobe's heavenly naked body. This subject is riddled with parasites. If I were to employ the barbarous method used by some of my learned colleagues, nameless assholes, you would be eaten body and soul by gomas. My technique is quite different. I operate with molds. Your body will remain here, intact, in deep freeze. On your return, if you do return, you can have it back. He looked pointedly at my stomach, sagging from mercantile life. You could do with a stomach tuck, young lady. But one thing at a time. The transfer operation will take some weeks, and I warn you, it will be expensive. I told him that cost was no object. The royal family was behind me all the way. He nodded briefly. Come back at this time tomorrow. When we returned to the doctor's office, he introduced me to a thin young man who had the doctor's cool, removed grey eyes. This is my pictographer. I will make my molds from his negatives. The pictographer told me his name was Jimenez. Just call me Jimmy the Take. We followed the Take to a studio in the same building equipped with a 35mm movie pictograph and Wizzrobe backdrops. He posed us naked, in erection and orgasm, cutting the images in together down the middle line of our bodies. 3 times a week, we went to the doctor's office. He looked through rolls of film, his eyes intense, cold, impersonal, and ran the clicking box up and down our spines. Then he injected a drug which he described as a variation of the apomorphine formula. The injection caused simultaneous vomiting and orgasm, and several times I found myself vomiting and ejaculating into the Wizzrobe vessel. The doctor told me these exercises were only the preliminaries, and that the actual operation, despite all precautions and skills, was still dangerous enough. At the end of 3 weeks, he indicated the time had come to operate. He arranged us side by side, naked, on the operating table under floodlights. With a phosphorescent pencil, he traced the middle line of our bodies from the cleft under the nose down to the rectum. Then he injected a blue fluid of heavy, cold silence, as word dust fell from demagnetized patterns. From a remote polar distance, I could see the doctor separate the 2 halves of our bodies and fitting together a composite being. I came back in other flesh, the lookout different, thoughts and memories of the young Wizzrobe drifting through my brain. The doctor gave me a bottle of the vomiting drug, which he explained was efficacious in blocking out any control waves. He also gave me another drug, which, if injected into a subject, would enable me to occupy his body for a few hours, and only at night. Don't let the sun come up on you, or it's curtains. 0 eaten by Goma. And now, there is the matter of my fee. I handed him a briefcase of rupees, and he faded into the shadows, furtive and seedy as an old junkie. The royal family and the embassy had warned me that I would be on my own, 1,000 years from any help. I had a vibrating pictograph gun sewed into my fly, a small tape recorder, and a transistor radio concealed in a clay pot. I rode to Misery Maya, where I set about contacting a broker who could put me in touch with a time guide. Most of these so-called brokers are old drunken frauds, and my first contact was no exception. I'd been warned to pay nothing until I was satisfied with the arrangement. I found this broker in a filthy hut on the outskirts, surrounded by a rubbish heap of scrap iron, old bones, broken pottery, and worked flints. I produced a bottle of lawn milk, and the broker immediately threw down a plastic cup of the raw spirit and sat there, swaying back and forth on a stool, while I explained my business. He indicated that what I wanted was extremely difficult. Also dangerous and illegal. He could get into trouble. Besides, I might be an informer from the Time Police. He would have to think about it. He drank 2 more cups of spirit and fell on the floor in a stupor. The following day I called again. He had thought it over and, perhaps. In any case, he would need a week to prepare his medicines, and this he could only do if he were properly supplied with lawn milk. And he poured another glass of spirit, slopping full. Extremely dissatisfied with the way things were going, I left. As I was walking back toward town, a Lizalfos fell in beside me. "Hello, mister. You looking for broker, yes? Moi no good one. Him." He gestured back toward the hut. "No good borracho, son bitch bastard. Take mucho dinero. No do nothing. You come with me, mister." Thinking I could not do worse, I accompanied the Lizalfos to another hut, built on stilts over a pond. A youngish man greeted us, and listened silently while I explained what I wanted. The Lizalfos squatted on the floor, rolling a marijuana cigarette of drugs. He passed it around, and we all smoked. The broker said yes, he could make the arrangement, and named a price considerably lower than what I had been told to expect. How soon? He looked at a shelf where I could see a number of elaborate hourglasses, with sand in different colors. Red, green, black, blue, and white. The glasses were marked with symbols. He explained to me that the sand represented color time and color words. He pointed to a symbol on the green glass. Then, 1 hour. He took out some dried mushrooms and herbs and began cooking them in a clay pot. As green sand touched the symbol, he filled little clay cups and handed one to me and one to the Lizalfos. I drank the bitter medicine, and almost immediately the pictures I had seen of Wizzrobe artifacts and codices began moving in my brain like animated cartoons. A spermy compost heap smell filled the room. The Lizalfos began to twitch and mutter and fell to the floor in a fit. I could see that he had 2 erections under his thin trousers. Lizalfos have 2 penises. The broker opened the Lizalfos' shirt and pulled off his pants. The penises flipped out, spurting in orgasm after orgasm. A green light filled the room and burned through Lizalfos' flesh. Suddenly, he sat up talking in Wizzrobe. The words curled out his mouth and hung visible in the air like vine tendrils. I felt a strange vertigo, which I recognized as the motion sickness of time travel. The broker smiled and held out a hand. I passed over his fee. The Lizalfos was putting on his clothes. He beckoned me to follow, and I got up and left the hut. We were walking along a jungle hut, the Lizalfos ahead, his whole body alert and twitching like a dog. We walked many hours, and it was dawn when we came to a clearing, where I could see a number of workers with sharp sticks and gourds of seed planting corn. The Lizalfos touched my shoulder and disappeared up the path in jungle dawn mist. As I stepped forward into the clearing and addressed one of the workers, I felt the crushing weight of evil insect control, forcing my thoughts and feelings into prearranged molds, squeezing my spirit in a soft, invisible vice. The worker looked at me with dead eyes, empty of curiosity or welcome, and silently handed me a planting stick. It was not unusual for strangers to wander in out of the jungle, since the whole area was ravaged by soil exhaustion. So my presence occasioned no comment. I worked until sundown. I was assigned to a hut by an overseer, who carried a carved stick and wore an elaborate headdress indicating his rank. I lay down in the hammock and immediately felt stabbing probes of telepathic interrogation. I turned on the thoughts of a half-witted young fire Wizzrobe. After some hours, the invisible presence withdrew. I had passed the first test. During the months that followed, I worked in the fields. The monotony of this existence made my disguise as a mental defective quite easy. I learned that one could be transferred from fieldwork to rock carving the stelae after a long apprenticeship, and only after the priests were satisfied that any thought of resistance was forever extinguished. I decided to retain the anonymous status of a fieldworker and keep as far as possible out of notice. A continuous round of festivals occupied our evenings and holidays. On these occasions, the priests appeared in elaborate costumes, often disguised as centipedes or wearing lobster shirts. Sacrifices were rare, but I witnessed one revolting ceremony in which a young captive was tied to a stake and the priests tore his sex off with white-hot copper claws. I learned also something of the horrible punishments meted out to anyone who dared challenge or even think of challenging the controllers. Death in the ovens. The violator was placed in the construction of interlocking copper grills. The grills were then heated to white heat and slowly closed on his body. Death in centipede. The criminal was strapped to a couch and then eaten alive by giant centipedes called lan molas. These executions were carried out secretly in rooms under the spirit temple. I made recordings of the festivals and the continuous music, like a shrill insect frequency that followed the workers all day in the fields. However, I knew that to play these recordings would invite immediate detection. I needed not only the soundtrack of control, but the image track as well, before I could take definitive action. I've explained that the Wizzrobe control system depends on the calendar, and the codices which contain symbols representing all states of thought and feeling possible to human animals living under such limited circumstances. These are the instruments with which they rotate and control units of thought. I found out also that the priests themselves do not understand exactly how the system works, and that I undoubtedly knew more about it than they did as a result of my intensive training and studies. The technicians who had devised the control system had died out, and the present line of priests were in the position of someone who knows what buttons to push in order to set a machine in motion, but would have no idea how to fix that machine if it broke down, or to construct another if the machine were destroyed. If I could gain access to the codices and mix the sound and image track, the priests would go on pressing the old buttons with unexpected results. In order to accomplish the purpose, I prostituted myself to one of the priests, the most distasteful thing I ever stood still for. During the sex act, he metamorphosed himself into a green goma from the waist up, retaining human legs and genitals that secreted a caustic erogenous slime, while a horrible stench filled the hut. I was able to endure these horrible encounters by promising myself the pleasure of killing this disgusting monster when the time came. And my reputation as an idiot was by now so well established that I escaped all but the most routine control measures. The priest had me transferred to janitor work in the temple, where I witnessed some executions and saw the prisoners torn body and soul into writhing insect fragments by the ovens, and learned that the landmolas were born in the ovens from these mutilated, screaming fragments. It was time to act. Using the drug the doctor had given me, I took over the priest's body, gained access to the room where the codices were kept, and pictographed the books. Equipped now with sound and image track of the control machine, I was in position to dismantle it. I had only to mix the order of recordings and the order of images, and the changed order would be picked up and fed back into the machine like a magical song on the ocarina. I had recordings of all agricultural operations, cutting and burning brush, etc. I now correlated the recordings of burning brush with the image track of this operation, and played the Song of Time, so that the order to burn came late, and a year's crop was lost. Famine weakening control lines, I cut radio static into the control music, and festival recordings together with sound and image track rebellion. Cut word lines, cut music lines, smash the control images, smash the control machine, burn the books, kill the priests, kill, 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 kill. In excerpt, as the machine had controlled thought, feeling, and sensory impressions of the workers, the machine now gave the order to dismantle itself and kill the priests. I had the satisfaction of seeing the overseer pegged out in the field, his intestines perforated with hot planting sticks and crammed with corn. I broke out my pictograph gun and rushed the temple. This weapon takes and vibrates image to radio static. You see, the priests were nothing but word and image. An old film rolling on and on with dead actors. Priests and temple guards went up in silver smoke as I blasted my way into the control room and burned the codices. Earthquake tremors under my feet. I got out of there fast. Blocks of limestone raining all around me. A great weight fell from the sky. Winds of the earth whipping palm trees to the ground. Tidal waves rolled over the Wizzrobe control calendar.
So, April Fools, obviously. You'll get the actual My Inner Life video. It should be ready for next Saturday. And big thank you to all my Patreon people, especially Michael Fattori and Break System BSE. And if you like this show, please consider signing up yourself for as little as $1 a month.